Good morning and welcome everyone. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to the Black Country Business Festival for having CBC as part of the festival this year. Thank you to Paula Dower for being our speaker today. And thank you to all of you who have joined us for this event. My name is Fiona and I'm the project administrator at CBC for Sandwell, Walsall and Wolverhampton. CBC is a Creative People and Places project which is funded by Arts Council England. We aim to make the most of local talent, working with people to discover, explore and grow an exciting and meaningful programme of arts activity across the Black Country. I'll now hand over to Paula, our speaker, who will introduce herself to you and tell you more about what will be discussed and shared for today's event. Thank you, Paula. Over to you.
Thanks, Fiona. Are we ready to go now? Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thanks, Fiona, for the introduction. My name is Paula Dower. I'm the Operations Director at DASH, which stands for Disability Arts in Shropshire. We work with disabled artists and curators since lockdown nationally. And we also work in partnership with lots of organisations. We're doing work with Creative Black Country. We do a curatorial commissioning programme. And that's in association with partners in Middlesbrough, in Birmingham and in Cambridge currently. And we are extending that programme to look for 3 new partners. We have a young people's programme. So working again since lockdown virtually with workshops around worlds within worlds. So 3 artists-led workshops for young disabled artists to work on their practice, and that will be exhibited very soon on our website. One of the biggest things that we did during lockdown was mentoring, online mentoring, and to date there's been over 100 artists mentored online. We've also done a pilot project called BEAST, which stands for Business, Education and Skills Training. So that's looked at various things like CV writing, social media, video editing skills, tax, which is actually one of our biggest attended events of that programme. We're hoping that we'll get more funding to extend that programme further. So we do quite a lot at DASH, and I've worked there for 17 years and I have experience in marketing, in photography and fundraising, and so I do quite a lot of different things. But marketing is one of my passions, and making my marketing accessible has been a big passion of mine since I started working at DASH. And so what I wanted to talk to you about today was why it is important. And to do that, I'm going to take you through a short story. When I was asked to do this, it reminded me of my roots, which are in Tipton. And I lived very close to a school, and in our assemblies we had a lot of stories, and they were like Aesop's fables, like the tortoise and the hare and things like that. So that's the background for this story that I'm going to tell you about. It's called A Tale from Gornall Wood. Once upon a time, in a woodland not very far away, there lived 2 young badgers. Their names were Bobby and Betty, and they loved to play Let's Pretend. One evening, a young fox happened upon the siblings playing and asked if he could join in too. "I would really love to be included in your story," said the fox, whose name was Freddie. And so the three played at being kings and queens of the wood. When Bobby and Betty told their parents about their fun with Freddie, there was trouble. "You should never trust a fox," shouted Mrs. Brockton. Mr. Brockton was not happy either, but the cries of their children persuaded the parents to meet Mrs. Foxall, who Mrs. Brockton agreed seemed like a nice enough sort. And so the three friends continued to make up stories and act them out using toadstools, ferns, and whatever else they found to create the settings for their plays. One evening, Freddie found a pile of nuts at the base of the old oak tree. He called the badgers over to see what he had found. The group were chatting excitedly about how they could use nuts in their play, when a screeching flash of fur zoomed down the trunk and snatched the nuts before returning as quickly as it came. It was Susie the squirrel. When safely out of reach, she shouted, "You thieves, you thieves, you thieves, you stole my nuts." Bobby, Betty and Freddie were shocked and a bit stunned, as Susie had thrown a nut at Freddie's head. Betty replied, "Oh, Susie, we are very sorry. We didn't know they were yours." Soon enough, Susie calmed down and said she supposed they were telling the truth and inquired why they wanted her nuts. Freddie said he was playing the part of the jester and wanted to juggle the acorns. Susie wanted to know more about their play, and Freddie promised not to eat her if she came down, and soon the trio of players became a quartet. As the days passed, the troupe grew in confidence and decided to put on a show for their parents, who loved it so much they wanted all their relatives to see it. Before long, talk of the show reached the animals of the wood. The parents helped put up notices inviting all the animals to see the show. However, there were some animals who said they could not go. The moles said they would not attend as they could not see what was happening. The snakes refused as they could not hear very well. The smaller creatures, like the mouse, were too frightened of large crowds, and the rabbits could not leave the younger bunnies home alone. The young actors were sad when they found this out, but they didn't know what to do to make the play accessible for everyone. Mr. and Mrs. Brockton thought they shouldn't fuss and said, if they don't come, that's their business, you can't make them. Overhearing this discussion was Othello, the most senior owl in the wood. "You might not be able to make them," he said, "but you could find ways to make them feel included." "How do we do that?" asked Bobby. "It's quite simple," the wise old owl replied. "You ask them," and with a hoot he flew away. So Bobby, Betty, Freddie and Susie went to see the moles, the snakes, the mice, and all the other animals they could think of that might not come, to ask how they could make them feel included and valued. It was a bit scary for the young animals at first, asking animals they didn't know for help, but their fears soon disappeared as the moles, the snakes, and the mice were so happy they were asked. The AA group was formed, Animal Access, in case you are wondering, to work towards making the show inclusive for all animals. The night of the show was a great success, and every creature in Gornall was there. The ARC, Animal Access Relations Committee, marketing team, had worked hard to make sure everyone knew they were wanted. The song thrush provided audio description for the moles, and Mr. and Mrs. Brockton created a creche for the youngsters. The deer provided their antlers so the smaller creatures could see and didn't feel crowded. And perhaps the most remarkable were the stoats, who put aside their war with the snakes to provide interpretation through dance. The show was the talk of Gornall for months to come, and the animals agreed they would work together every spring and summer to create a show for everyone to enjoy. So I hope you enjoyed that. It was a different way of saying why you should do accessible marketing. So it's a way of communicating with a much larger audience And good communications invite curiosity in the recipient. They make people feel good. And who doesn't want to feel good? For too long, disabled and deaf people feel excluded from events because the way that many organisations communicate is not accessible. That feeling of exclusion creates dismissal and potentially anger towards organisations that do not consider accessibility beyond ramps and toilets. Accessible marketing isn't an add-on, and it doesn't have to be a huge cost. If you see the same faces at your events, you're not doing something. You're not including everybody. So what I wanted to look at next was what are you required to do by law? When I was researching for this event and a few others I did earlier in the year, I looked at the Human Rights Commission website. All the links that I mentioned are going to be sent to you after the event, so don't worry about writing things down. So the Human Rights Commission say that every advertisement, every form or notice or marketing, emails, social media that are aimed at the public to promote your work have to be inclusive, but you cannot say that people cannot come. You can target your marketing to a particular group of people, say for a lunch club for older people, for a sporting club for disabled people, or an art group for young disabled people. You do not have to advertise in all formats to adhere to equality law, but why would you want to? If anybody's got any ideas on that, do post them in the chat. Why would you want to? Because you want to attract a diverse audience. You want new people to come and see your work. You want everyone to feel included. And so we can have a little look at some of the literature that's dropped through my door recently. This is one. And as you can probably see, it's absolutely awful. We've got dark grey writing with a white outline on an image of something. I'm not quite sure what. I think it might be a window. I don't know how they expect people to read this. I can only just do it with my glasses on. And I think we're so used to seeing these things all the time that we kind of dismiss them. But as a colleague, Jo Verrant, said in her talk in Australia many, many years ago, it goes straight in the bin. Actually, it goes in my box of really bad marketing materials to show people. One of the things that we did with a partner in Nottingham that we were working with was our accessible marketing training. And we were working with them with an artist called Juan Delgado, who was commissioned to do a piece of work that was called Altered Landscapes. And then we worked with them to make their exhibition more accessible, to make their marketing more accessible. Normally their exhibition materials would be on an A5 leaflet. And so to make it more accessible, we said, make the print size bigger. So they went from an A5 leaflet to an A4 leaflet. Instantly, I can read that without my glasses on. So I know it's more accessible to more people. They also worked with a local group and with a designer to create an easy read guide. So this opens out and then maps out the journey of the refugees across the land to England and France. And they tested these tools by putting each one out in the same place. They also had an audio description guide. They did BSL interpreted talks. And as you can imagine, the Easy Read Guide was actually the one that was taken the most. They had to reprint them a number of times. And it wasn't just people that were disabled that were using the accessible guide. It was people who didn't have English as a foreign language. It was young children. It was older people. People who, when you've got a lot of text, they find it difficult. So it didn't just open up one aspect, it opened up lots. And I think that's the most important thing about accessible marketing. I'm going to share my screen with you now so that we can have a look at how we can make things more accessible. So we've got another terrible example of marketing, which is the Old Orlerton website. This is a restaurant which is just up the road from me. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of different styles of text on there. And if we just have a quick look at the next page. Sorry, I've got a menu bar in the way. There we go. We'll look at the restaurant. Here we've got beige kind of text on a white background. And this is one of the tools that's going to be in the information that we send out to you afterwards. Here we've got the colour in the text, which is this block here. And then we've got the background colour. And you can see that for accessibility, it's failed. It's only passed on one, which is the AA standard, but that would only be if it was in very large text. Again, we've got terrible colour. You can pick the colour dropper and just select the colour of the text. And again, you can see that everything is just failed on that one. There are a lot of tools that you can use to check your website. We've got a link here for the colour contrast analyzer that I just showed you. Got the Human Rights Commission website. And we've got lots of other website testing links that you can use. Stage Text, who we're doing a 50% off subtitling service. You can check that out. I'm not sure if it's still available. Another thing I wanted to tell you about was EasyChirp, which is a way of seeing alternative text on images. However, Twitter is a lot more accessible now. And you can actually see the alternative text on Twitter. So years ago, when I started doing this, you would not be able to see the alternative text that you've put in. But now Twitter's caught up. And you can see here the alternative text that we've got on this image. I was once asked why we should do this if blind people can't see it. Well, the answer is that not everyone was born blind. It's a very, very small percentage of people who were born with no sight at all. So a lot of people who use Twitter are visually impaired. And if you use the alternative text, you are making them feel included. You're making them feel wanted. And everybody uses Twitter these days for social media. Facebook as well. You can add alternative text to images on there. One of the things that we've been doing at Dash over the last couple of years is to make sure that every call out for work that we do has a video, that it's captioned, and it has a BSL interpreter. If they're not centre stage, then they're definitely, you know, the first thing on our mind when we're creating a call out. And these things are a little bit more pricey. But if you're looking at grant funding, make sure that you put these things into your application, because funders like Arts Council have an extra amount of money that you can use. Another aspect that I wanted to talk to you about was about adding alternative text. You can do this in Microsoft Word. And again, I can send out this how-to document about how to put in that information. We've got it in 2007, 2010. I'm actually using Word 2016 now, which is slightly different. As you can see, I've inserted this picture, and that's actually my brother and his friend Timmy in our back garden in Evans Close in Tipton. And how I got there was to right click, use format picture, and then go to the layer and properties, and then you'll see the alt text box. One of the things that I like to do when I'm doing a full day of accessible marketing training is to do a exercise which asks for the description of an image in one sentence, then asks you to put that into a tweet. Now you've got 1,000 characters in a tweet that you can use to describe what you see in the image. So what I would do with this one particularly is we can start off with there are two boys with their tricycles in a garden, but then we'd maybe say there are roses, behind them we can see a fence, it's a sunny day, there are fluffy clouds in the sky. to the right hand side, there is a swing, and it looks like there's a vegetable plot. And in the foreground, there's grass. One child is sitting on a tricycle while the other holds a cricket bat, I think he was carrying there. So you could practice this as a game, a party game. You can do it in one sentence, you can do it as a tweet, and then you could do it as a longer paragraph. And you can use those then to look at the images that you use on your website. You can do quick ones if you've got a lot of images to put on, but if you put more and more description, blind and visually impaired people will be able to see a lot more, be able to understand a lot more from what you've said. Another game that I like to play is to ask one person to draw while the other person describes the image. So this is a picture of leaves that was created using monoprinting in one of Dash's workshops. This is the image that somebody drew. It's not exactly the same, but it's pretty close. That was quite a simple one. So I pushed that class a little bit further. And this is work by Simon McEwen, a disabled artist, and using another disabled artist, Matt Fraser, as the study of his sculpture. We've got Matt and Simon in the foreground there. Now that looks like an absolutely horrible picture to try and describe, but this is the image that came. And I think you can agree that's pretty good. So do try this with colleagues, with friends, with family, and you'll see how easy it gets to be. What else? Sorry, I've lost myself a little bit there. I think, oh, print. Print was the next thing I was going to talk to you about. I'll just share my screen again. So again, in your pack, we've got this 10-point guide to print accessibility. And the first thing is to use a reasonably sized font. We use a minimum of 12 point at Dash and 16 for large print. Again, be careful about the type of font that you're using. Arial, News Gothic, Helvetica. Don't use italics and keep any capitals to a minimum. Be careful when you're putting text and images together. As you can see in this example, the title of the picture has been put on top of the image. Always put it underneath, either side. It's not a good idea to try and lay text over images unless you've got a good, clear area that is simple and it's not going to get confused. Try and keep your spacing. Don't cramp things up too much. Again, that makes things much more difficult to read. And again, you can use the color contrast analyzer. Again, we've got a link to that in the handouts. And that will really help you. It's a little tiny tool. It doesn't take up a lot of memory on your computer. And it will give you a great idea about which colours were going to work for you. I did have one of our newsletter subscribers ask many years ago if we could change the text, the colour of the text on our newsletters, because we were using red and black, and the red made it more difficult for her to see. And though we were only using it for small amounts of text, that it kind of jarred for her, and it made everything else more difficult. So it was a really quick, easy one to do, change the colour. And nobody else had an issue with the next colour. So we were good. You can use images and easy read symbols. It's another thing that we've recently started supporting at Dash is creating easy read documents. You can find training online for that as well, if that's something that you want to do. And there is a whole bank of symbols that you can use, which particularly people with a learning disability, they find information like that much easier to understand. You can also make sure that you make alternative formats, so a Word or a PDF version that can be read by a screen reader. Create an audio CD or a sound file hosted on a website. Be careful when you're using JPEGs to send out by email as a flyer, because if you've put images on that JPEG, screen readers can't read them. So you need to make sure that you've put that information in the body of the email as well as maybe in the JPEG. And that is also the case when you're putting things onto Instagram or Facebook. You actually need to make sure that you've put that information in text as well. Plain English. One of my big bugbears working with a lot of cultural organisations is using ArtSpeak. So that's very unaccessible for many people. And again, I'm going to send you all a document which shows you how you can look at creating more accessible text. So a lot of the cultural websites that I've looked at would say that the reading level of their audience would be degree level or above. And that's not a lot of people. That's not everyone. So you need to try and bring down the level to make it more accessible. Newspapers are looking at grade 7, which can jar sometimes with artists or curators, because they feel like it's being dumbed down. And I was, well, if you have to feel like you're dumbing down, do you only want other artists and curators coming to see your show? Or do you want everyone to come and see your show? Do you want everybody to feel included? And so I've got some tips which are free and easy to use. So that's my first one, is use plain English. Don't use ArtSpeak or any other jargon that you've got in your particular sector or industry. Use high contrast text, not grey on black. if you're having difficulty, ask your neighbour, ask your nan, ask your uncle to read it. Keep it simple. If you've got someone that's not in the same sector as you to read your work and they understand it, you've got a much wider audience straight away. Do use symbols, use illustrations and photos, but keep them simple. Make sure you describe your images. If you can't put them in the text, try to put at least a sentence underneath to describe the image and play the audio description game. And that's it from me. And I'll hand back over to Fiona and we're going to have some questions, I think.
Thank you, Paula. I found that really, really interesting. I've been involved in events for some time and I kind of thought I knew what I was doing to make things accessible, but certainly a lot of that advice has enabled me to think a lot more carefully about what I do. And as you said at the beginning, none of it is rocket science and it's available to us all. You know, it's accessible to us to make our events accessible. So thank you very much for that today. We'd love to hear everybody else's questions. As I mentioned at the beginning, please do post them in the chat box. Please pop a Q at the beginning of your question if you have one, just so that we don't get them mixed up with any other information that's coming through in the chat box. So if you'd like to post your questions for Paula, then I will read them out and we can get them answered for everybody here at the event today. Whilst you're doing that, just to confirm for you, Paula, you're going to be sending me all that lovely information, which I can then forward on, aren't you, to our attendees?
Yeah, definitely will do.
Lovely, yeah. I will be sending that on in the emails, by the way, that we have that you provided when you booked your tickets for the event today. So that's how you'll receive that from us. You'll also be receiving a feedback survey, which will also pop in the chat box. But if you don't have time to do it today, it would be lovely if you could take the time to send us your feedback. It's really valuable for Creative Black Country and for everybody involved in the event today as well, to know what you think about the event, the way it's been presented to you, the content, and perhaps also as well what other things you might like to see us provide for you. But if you'd like to pop your questions for now in the chat box, that will be absolutely great. And while we're waiting for those questions to come up, Paula, I have to say, I think one of the most effective elements of your presentation earlier was showing up that flyer and illustrating beautifully how inaccessible that flyer was, because my first reaction was, Paula, what are you showing us this for? I can't see it. And then, of course, do you know what I mean? And that job done, basically, from your point of view, wasn't it? Does it surprise you, the volume of material that is still what you would regard as, well, what is inaccessible to many? Does it surprise you, the amount of material that comes like that now?
No, not really, because I don't think they teach it when, you know, in graphic design classes. I don't know why. I mean, years ago, when I suppose back in the noughties, it seemed very fashionable to have the tiniest text, you know, have a vast expanse of grey or black and have tiny text. And, you know, these were designers that I knew that were creating this. I'm like, why are you doing that? And well, it looks good. And I said, but you can't read it.
Yeah.
Unless you're close, or now my eyesight is deteriorating, and now I have difficulty reading things that are less than 12-point type size. More and more of it is just like, oh, really? But then when you see something like that, you're kind of like, have you looked at it? Have you looked at it yourself? And while they think it makes things stand out, actually, if you're using it multiple times, it doesn't make it stand out. If you've got outlines around your text, it doesn't make it stand out if it's all of the text.
Yes, that's another very good point, because I noticed on one of your tips when you were sharing the screen was also don't use underline. And is that partly because it visually confuses where how the letters are formed and shaped as well, because they're quite close to the bottom of letters, aren't they? The underline. They
are, and so especially when you've got a Y or a P or a Q or something like that, it can disrupt the flow of the word.
Right.
And then I think also, if you've got dyslexia, or if you are dyslexic, then again that changes how you see the words. So that makes it more difficult for people with dyslexia. And also potentially anybody with a learning disability.
Right.
It could make it more difficult for them.
So it's like a sort of visual congestion, so to speak, perhaps. Yeah,
possibly.
Makes it difficult. Well, I'm hogging all your time, but everybody do please pop your questions in the chat box, because we've only got a few minutes to go now, and it would be a shame to lose Paula. I'm all for making the most of my experts, Paula, and squeezing as much out of you as I can, like the juice out of an orange. It's the way I look at it.
It's a shame that we've had so little time, really. It's quite a fun a day when I do a day in person. It's usually difficult to stop people talking about some of the exercises that we do. So the games that I said about doing the drawing game and the describing game, that can really gets people thinking about how people with a visual impairment understand things. Yes,
certainly that second image where with the figure that was a slimmed down Michelin man, if anyone understands that reference, but the ability to describe that well, to get that replicated to that level was exceptional. I don't think I would have known where to start, to be honest. So I can see that being an extremely valuable exercise for people.
Yeah, and these have all been done by who people claim not to be an artist. They're people who work in marketing departments generally, and they're all horrified. And then, when we come to look at the work afterwards, they're like, oh yes, I do understand that. So actually having that description and practicing that description is really, really useful.
We have had a question pop up from Laura, and she asks, do you have any advice of how to get the word out to people for accessible performances?
I think it was, to go back to my story, go back to looking at your community, looking at the different groups that are around that you want to attract, make contact with them. So if you've got so you want to advertise that you're I've got a matinee session maybe for mums with young children. So, you know, maybe go to local nurseries or go to your community centre, your library, go to your library, use your library. You know, there's lots of information there about local groups. So there could be a talking newspaper. There are a couple of talking newspapers in Shropshire. So they would communicate through a broadcast to visually impaired and blind people. There will be deaf clubs, deaf groups, we've got one called Signal, and I think in Black Country there's Beacon, Deaf Explorer. Make sure you're in contact with those organisations that have a wider remit within a disability, and they can pass that information on.
Right, so research, I suppose, those target audiences and the networks, and network with them in order to help spread the information that little bit further. Yeah. So
and if
now,
you have, you know, if you're doing surveys, ask the question, you know, do you have disability? Or do you, we use the social model. So it's like, you know, do you feel that you are disabled by society, and rather than medical impairment? So we don't ask if a person is blind or is deaf or uses a wheelchair. We ask how we can make our work accessible for them. And then we also, you know, you could ask, you know, would you like to be part of a focus group?
That's a really good idea, because that is really getting the information at grassroots level, isn't it? The real hands-on, this is me, this is my life. Think about this. And
make
people...
it valuable for them as well. You value their input, maybe give them free tickets to a show. And then they can help you, you know, this didn't work for me. You know, that wasn't accessible. What about trying this? So, you know, you're giving them something, you're giving them, you know, tickets to the show, or pay them. That's the best thing. Pay them for their advice is the best thing you can do. But if your budgets don't stretch that far, think of other ways that you can value their expertise.
Yeah, acknowledge their guidance, really, and their help, because I think all of us want to make things accessible as possible, and it's often ignorance that stops us, but we need to do ourselves, be proactive about removing that ignorance, don't we?
Just to answer your question, Laura, is that okay?
Yes, says Laura, it does. Thank you very much. As I said, I have only got now a very few minutes left. So if anybody else has a question, it was lovely to hear from Laura. So it'd be lovely to hear from others of you as well. Before we do wrap up for today, it has been an extremely insightful session, Paula. I would say that most definitely. So thank you very much again.
Thank you.
And next time we'll see if we can get you in person when all of those things are, when we're all opened up again fully. That would be lovely to do some of those challenges.
Yes, I am looking forward to getting back out there. I'm doing a course at Wolverhampton University, and I started in January. We're going back next month to actually do some in-person classes, so that will be interesting because I've not been there at all.
Oh, okay. Well, as a Wolfrunian, this isn't relevant, but as a Wolfrunian, it's a nice university. You'll like it. They're lovely people there. We haven't actually received any more questions from our audience. So I think perhaps we should say that this event is now concluded. I think we've shared all the information that we can. Just a reminder to everybody, you'll see in the chat box, we've popped the link to the survey. Please do take time to fill that in if you can. It is extremely valuable for all of us involved in this event. We will also be, from CBC, emailing you a link to that if you're not able to do it at the moment. And I'll also be sending you our contact details, and of course all the amazing information that Paula is very kindly going to share with everybody in order for you to go on and develop and make whatever you're doing, whether it's your flyers or your in-person events or whatever activity, as accessible to as wide a range of an audience as possible. Just before we do close, Lorna, thank you very much, Lorna Brooks. She says, thanks, folks, really interesting. So, you know, I think it's lovely when the audience say thank you. I hope everybody else, as well as Lorna, has found this as interesting as I have too. So, Paula, thank you very much for your time today. I'd also like to take a minute just to say thank you to both Rachel, who's not on screen at the moment, and to Alicia for signing this event for us. And finally, I'd like to thank everybody in the audience for their attention and their time today. I know time is very valuable, even perhaps more so sometimes with all of these Zoom things going on. So thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning, and thank you for your appreciation that is now actually just coming in on the chat box. So Jenny and Fran and Victoria, thank you for your thanks. I hope you have had a really valuable morning with us. Thank you very much.